Welcome to Railway Empire 2 Fundamentals. All right, hi, this is Attican and welcome to another Railway Empire 2 Fundamentals video. We're going to talk about supply and demand, and I want to start out with the very basics. There's a ton of stuff to cover on supply and demand. I think it is one of the critical, if not the most critical concept in the game of Railway Empire 2. So I want to talk about supply and demand and how do we actually have supply and demand in this game and actually have trains that run. So I built this little area down here. We've got a connection up here to some cattle. We've got the city of Indianapolis with the beer industry. And it's connected to the city of Louisville with meat. We have no trains on this our little tiny network yet. And that's intentional so that we can talk about these concepts. The first one is that it really is supply and demand. You can't think about just supply or just demand to get trains to run. So for example, let's say I said, okay, I want to run a line that goes from here to here, and I want my train, I want to run full, and I want to run a little freight line and I want to carry cattle to Indianapolis. And I'm going to commit, and it says, according to the settings you made, your train line cannot perform any actions at the station of Baker Terminal. Well, why is that? Watch what happens. It's going out here, it's getting ready to load up, and nothing happens. Well, we have supply, we have cattle, but there's no demand because the city of Indianapolis does not need cattle. The city of Louisville does. So if we were to take our little line and simply say, okay, run to Louisville, then we watch what happens to our train. Once I let it run, it starts loading cattle. And see that? It says livestock for Louisville. So now we've created both supply and demand and linked them together with a train. So in this game, for make a train run, you have to have supply, you have to have demand, and you have to have a link between them with a train, okay? So let's go back to our line here. Let's change this line. I'm going to change it back to Louisville, okay? So now if we run it back to Louisville, and I'm going to throw that train away, and by the way, here's a little trick here's a bonus trick. If you have a train that you want to get rid of, or you want to replace it, if you just go into your edit line and set the train count to 0 and confirm, and then go back into edit line and add a train back in, now you've got a new train, okay? But if you'll notice, our train is back to the state it was before. It's not going to load anything because there's no demand here. Now, we know that warehouses are in this game, and let's create demand with a warehouse. So we're going to add a warehouse to Indianapolis, okay? And we'll let it run. Well, still nothing, okay? Well, as we covered in our warehouse basics video, fundamentals video, you have to go into the warehouse and say, okay, I want this warehouse to handle cattle. So it's going to go look for people who can supply cattle, and it's going to look where it's connected and look for people who demand cattle, and it will take in cattle if it finds both those things, a supplier and a demand, right? Okay, so let's watch our train now. How's it doing? How's our little train doing now? Well, it's doing nothing. Now, why is that? We've got supply, we've got a warehouse, but the problem is that the warehouse is looking for demand. It still doesn't see it because remember, there's no trains on this track. So if we just simply put a train here and a train here, and it could be an automatic line, it could be a freight line, not a passenger line. It's got to be able to carry the cattle. Let's just put an automatic line, and we'll run that Derwent again. And by putting that one train on that track, so now we've created the possibility of moving cattle from here to here. Then if we go look at our train here, and I let it start running, notice it's starting to load cattle again, and now these cattle are going to Louisville. But this train only goes to here, so it's going to go to here, go to the warehouse, and then the train that runs between Indianapolis and Louisville can take the cattle on down to Louisville and deliver them. All right, so we've got supply with a train going to demand with a train connection through a warehouse. So in any way you look at it, you have to have supply with a train to the demand. And in this case, a little more complex, we've got a supply through 2 trains to the demand. Okay, so that's the most important concept is figuring out, do I actually have a demand? Do I actually have supply? Have I linked them together with a train? Okay, so now that I know how important supply and demand are, and I have a basic idea of what it is, well, how do I know what my specific supply and demand are in my circumstances? So what do I want? What can I supply? So 2 ways to find the demand. Click on a city. Remember that the ultimate consumer of everything will be your city, the citizens of your city. So cities are basically your consumers for everything. And we can look here, if you click anywhere around the city, as long as you're not clicking directly on the station or track or a train, I get this pop-up which shows us information about Indianapolis. How many citizens it has, what's its fulfillment of demand at current, what can it export, and how much is it producing. So it makes beer. It could hold 4 in its export warehouse, and it's got 10 in there right now. And here's the one we're interested in, goods and supplies. And I'll go through this quickly. It's very simple. One is, as the city grows, it demands more and more goods. Every time they're basically on 5,000 citizen increments, and a new product crops up that the city wants. The early ones are wanted by any city. Settlements only need wood and grain and meat, but after they become a city or a town, a small city, very small city, then they'll want these basic goods here, and they'll want grain and corn and lumber, and they'll want sugar, and typically cloth and meat and beer. So this is telling us that for grain, the stock in the city, each city has its own storage where it can hold a limited supply of everything that it needs. This is telling us that in the city of Indianapolis, right at this moment, there's 12 wagons of grain. Everything's done. The unit of measure is the wagon, like a train wagon or a train car. So there's 12 wagons of grain in the stock in Indianapolis. There's 5 more on the way by train, right? And the demand per week, Indianapolis will consume 1.2 wagons of grain every week. And similarly, you can see down through all the rest of these. Okay, so there's one way to know your demand is just to look in your city. The other one, it's in probably in somewhat many ways more useful, is the flow of goods. I can go to flow of goods and click on any product I want to, or good I want to look at, like grain, and I can see both my suppliers are green, my consumers are red, and this one tells me that I can produce 2.8 grain at this farm. There's 18 in that farm storage. The farm itself has storage, and it can produce 2.8 a week. That Indianapolis would like to have 1.2 per week, and right now it's getting all at once, and you can all at once of the grain. And then Louisville. So that's Indianapolis, 1.2 and 100, and Louisville is 0.4 and 100. So it wants 0.4 wagons of grain every week, and right now it's perfectly satisfied. If we look at corn, different story. We see that neither city is getting what it wants. They're both at 0% satisfaction. Louisville would like to have 0.4 of a wagon per week, and Indianapolis would like to have 0.4 of a wagon per week. All right, so now that we know the basic concept of how supply and demand have to be linked together with a train or trains in Railway Empire 2 in order to get trains to run, and we know how to figure out what our demand is, and we know how to figure out what our supply is or could be, then how do we figure out, based on all that, how many trains to run to meet the demand that we have. So that's very, very simple. We're going to take one simple example. We're going to take the corn. So we're going to look at the flow of goods and look at the corn. And we're going to say that we need to run our corn from right up here. If we look at our flow of goods and we look at corn and we look at Louisville, it needs 0.4 and it's getting nothing, right? So we have a demand of 0.4 that we would like to meet. So to meet a demand of 0.4, we could go up here to More Station and run a line down here. And we could say run full, so you're not just running around half full most of the time. And we'd say a freight line with the Derwent, it takes 57 days. Well, the way this works is if the duration of the route is done in days and the demand is done in weeks. So we can make a simple ratio that says 1 unit of demand, 1 car of demand per 7 days is the same as 8 cars that we could deliver on a train for how many days? So that's 1 is to 7 as 8 is to X. I'll spare you the math. The answer is 56. You take 7 times 8. It's 56 divided by 1, 56. So delivering 1 wagon of freight per 7 days or a week is the same as delivering 8 wagons every 56 days. So 56 becomes your key number, assuming you're running 8, full trains with 8 wagons. 56 is your key number to compare. Well, 56, 57.7 are almost the same thing, and we don't need a full 1 for Louisville. We only need 0.4. So we would be cool just running the 1 train. That'd be great. But I would encourage you to think of this in terms of systems, not just running to one place. And we have a little thing here, a 2-city cluster. We have Indianapolis and Louisville are going to work together to help each other grow. And remember, we did put that warehouse in Indianapolis. So I've got the warehouse turned on for the corn. So it's set up so that the warehouse is looking out to say, okay, who wants corn? Who can I see? Who can I send a train to from this warehouse that wants corn? And that would be Louisville, because we have trains running here, automatic trains that could carry the corn. And then it says, okay, well, where can I get the corn? Well, right now it's looking out and saying, well, nowhere. But if we set up a line up here, I threw that other line away. If we set up a line here and we go down here to Indianapolis, and again, we could say run full, a freight line with the Derwent. Now it's 47.2 days. It got shorter, of course, because we've lopped off those 10 days down to Louisville and back off that trip. So now we're just going to Indianapolis. But now we have to do the 0.4 corn that they want plus the 0.4 corn that they want. Kind of around that's 1. We need 1 wagon of corn to roll into our system every week. So to get that, we would need this to be a 46. That's about right. If we don't account for any growth, we're cool. We could probably run this train. It might be a little weak. You might want, but really it's 0.4 and 0.4, so you're probably good. This 47.2 would be fine. In fact, actually, it would be fine because it's 56 we're comparing it to. So we would be fine running 1 train. But if you were the type who micromanaged and came back and frequently checked your lines to see if you've got the right amount of trains and stuff, I would go with that. If you're more like me and you like to set it and forget it a little bit, I would encourage you to say, okay, well, what if we did 2? What if we had a demand of 2 here total for our system? That would give us some room to grow. Well, if I want 2, then what you do is divide the 56 by 2. That tells you that every 28 days you need to get a train with 8 wagons of corn into your system in order to meet a demand of 2. So how would I get the 47 days to be 28 days? Well, you run another train. So this is per train. A train takes 47 days. Let's round it to 48. 2 trains would take 24 days, right? Every 24 days, one of those 2 trains would be rolling into the station. So our 24 days here would be lower than the 28 we need to match a 2. So I would probably, in this circumstance, if I was really looking to do some growth here, I'd probably set this at 2 trains and let it go. And then what will happen is the 2 trains are overkill at the very start. As the cities grow, and you have the 2 trains out here waiting, ready, they'll run, of course, but they'll spend some waiting time. But what that's telling the guy up here who owns this farm, and that could be you, by the way. In fact, right here it is, because I wanted to show you an example of how I could bump it up. I could downgrade it, I could bump it up, but you can see it at level 1, it produces 1.6, right? And we wanted 2. Well, that's overkill for where the cities are now. So 1.6 is fine. But what will happen is if we didn't own this and a computer operator, an independent, privately owned kind of deal, they would monitor this and say, wait, you've got the capacity to carry more down there. They want more. And then the computer owner will raise this farm's production to match what you can deliver and what they need, and then you could stay in sync and you could run this right up to a total demand of 2 with just those 2 trains. Okay, so I would encourage you to think about the system you're building, and it's perfectly legit if you want to just run it into a city. That's perfectly okay. If that's how you want to do it, that's fine. That's your call. But if you think of it as a system, a 2-city system, or up here, we've got kind of a 3-city system, a 3-city cluster, I would call it, that you can see is having some problems right now because I haven't been in to check on it. But Grand Rapids and London and Toledo. And I would do the same process here and say, well, how much do they need? Just to show you, give you an idea. Grand Rapids here is at 100,000, and it's actually peaked out. It can't go above 100,000. So it's 100,064. How much corn does it want? It wants, wouldn't you know it, 2. Okay. Well, it wants so much beer because it has a large brewery, but it wants 2 corn. It wants 2 meat. It wants 2 of this, right? A little less of these down here, and this is the pattern I've seen. When you get to about 100,000, 120,000, they basically want 2 of each of the basic goods, and then it drops off to 1 of all the, see this? 1 per week of all the rest of the goods. So your basics are 2, the rest of them are 1. So if you wanted to build a basic system, set it and forget it, you would set up 2s, 2 per city, which would be really a total of 4. You would set this up to get 4 grain and 4 corn and 4 lumber per week and 4 those things, and then 1 of veggies and fruit and milk and all your manufactured goods, and you'd be good to go. It could grow very, very large, and you wouldn't even have to look at it. It would just keep on going. I'm going to attach a little spreadsheet that I built that does that little math for you, that tells you, if I want to do a demand of 3 and I'm running 8 wagons, then how many, what do I need as a target duration from the average for my trains? I will attach that in the description of this video. So hopefully that'll help you understand the very, very basics of supply and demand, the basics of how to find out what your demand and supply situation is, and the very fundamentals about how to figure out how many trains to run into your cities or into your systems. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it'll help you become a better player. I hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe, and join us for more Railway Empire 2 videos. Thank you.